If you look at pigs that have gone through a health challenge, and we've seen this over years and years and years of doing research at Swine Graphics, is that if you have a bell-shaped curve of distribution when you get ready to sell those pigs that looks like this one, you might be able to draw a line down here and say the gain in that group of pigs was a 1.6, okay? The gain in this group was a 1.8, and the gain in this group was a 2. But in almost every one of those groups of pigs that you sold, there were pigs in there that grew at 2.4 or 5 pounds. And you can confirm this even just going out into the finishers with the service guys. When they start marking pigs, when they go in at 165 days and mark that first load post-wean, they go in and mark that first load. If they get a quarter of a way down the barn and they got a load of pigs, you know what that distribution is going to look like. It's going to look like this, and that barn's going to have a 2-pound closeout. If they get halfway through that barn, it's going to be like this. If they struggle to get that first load, it's going to look like this. And you can just predict on when you got to go back in, depending on how far they got. Obviously, intuitively, you look in that barn and go, yep, there's a lot of big pigs in here. And that's what the distribution looks like. But regardless of that, there's always a group. I've seen groups of 30% mortality in a barn of finishing pigs that still have this load of pigs out here. Might be a little tougher to find that load, but they're in there. And so the questions you would always get from guys in finishing groups is, so why do some of these pigs do so well? These pigs were sicker than you can imagine. For 3 weeks or 2 weeks, they had flu, PRRS, and circle virus all at the same time. And yet, there are pigs in here that you step and look at them and go, where were you? Where were you for the last 3 weeks when everybody else was getting it handed to them? These pigs still go through the system with seemingly untouched. Some of these pigs, they seem to be oblivious to what has happened in that barn. And then, how do we clone that pig, right? I mean, that's been and there's some of the stuff coming out of K-State, looking at genetics, looking at different things that might be the reason why those pigs have done that. One of the things that stimulated a discussion that Gene Gorley and I had about some research that we had done at Swine Graphics, and it's probably been about 5 years ago now, was that we were in the middle of a synthetic amino acid replacement trial. So we had some diets in those trials that the soybean meal, and this was all actually kind of pre the usage of DDGs, so that we were basically replacing soybean meal. We had some diets where the soybean meal levels were getting down in the 50, 60, 70 pound range toward the end. In that trial, those pigs broke with ileitis about 30 days from the end of the trial. And so often in those cases, you get done and you go, wish this trial would have worked. We just took a hit. Maybe we can look at the data up to that point. Maybe we can, and you really kind of think about throwing these trials out because they don't replicate what you think you wanted to learn in that trial. Well, one of the things that we saw when we were looking at it is that the pigs that were on higher levels of soybean meal weren't even close to the negative effect that the pigs that were on the higher levels of synthetics. And so we got talking to some people, and Dean Boyd was one of them, and many of you have seen some of the stuff that Dean has done since then too, is that we started looking at that and going, what are we missing here when we do this? When these pigs get sick, is there something that we're not feeding them? Millions and millions of dollars have been spent to figure out how to feed healthy pigs for growth rate. Many of those trials involve, obviously, feeding pigs, grinding them up, trying to figure out what's in them. I used to talk to Roger Campbell a lot back, 15 years ago, and when he was at Bungie, and they did a lot of those trials where they would feed pigs, grind them up, try to figure out what was in the composition of that pig at every one of those points, try to put that in the diet, see if that gave them what they needed. You have to make, obviously, the corrections for intake and all those sorts of things, but it was all based on the fact that those pigs were growing, they were healthy, we were only feeding their growth rate, not feeding their health system if that was a challenge. And we knew this from the stuff that Tim Sadler had shown that when these pigs are challenged with health, whether that's something that we do with them artificially with vaccine or something that's done with a disease, it changes their growth rates. And we just accepted the fact that it happened. You know, we talked about the cost of the immune system being activated. We talked about all sorts of different things. So the questions were just there. So Gene and I had the thought process that we just went through and said, we're going to put together a think tank of this and say, what are we missing? And this think tank today has, and one of the next speakers is Nick is on there. We've got some veterinarians, we've got nutritionists, we've got immunologists. We just tried to put it together a group of people that said, we're not talking about fixing healthy pigs. Anybody in this room can place 1,000 pigs in the finisher, and if they stay healthy, nobody hardly has to look at them. Right? Everybody can manage healthy ones. It's more difficult managing the ones that something goes through them. And so we wanted to try to figure out if we know that we're going to have health challenges, we know we're going to have things that occur to us, so we're going to see if we can figure that out. I think I go back and say we really in these discussions had kind of 3 steps. One thing we thought we needed to do is we needed to develop a repeatable disease challenge model that would give us some reaction in those pigs so that we could try to figure out not only what things were different, but also if we did decide on interventions, what were we going to be, we had to be able to measure the difference in those interventions. So we needed a repeatable disease challenge model, determine if these were specific or metabolic and immunological changes to measure. So we went through this whole thought process. It's not just about some antibody response. You know, and I'm talking way out of school here now when I talk about, I say this because I've listened to Nick, acute phase proteins. Danny, you know what those are, right? I didn't know what they are, so. But there's all sorts of things in these pigs that are happening all the time when they get a health disease challenge that are happening naturally and need to happen because that's what makes them deal with the disease, but yet are they happening more severely in some other pigs that creates the bottom end of that distribution. So, and then we want to be able to have that model so that we have the ability, after we figure those 2 things out, are there interventions. We all deal with pigs that from the time that we get them farrowed in the farrowing house to when we have to market them, we're trying to put on as much weight as efficiently and costly, whether it's cost and from a feed efficiency standpoint, obviously that relates to cost. We're trying to get all that done, and we know that there's interferences with that. We know there's things that, whether they're health challenges, they're seasonal, heat stress, all those things. So the best that we can do to try to maximize that performance and throughput of that system is trying to deal with things that we know that we can intervene on. You know, and so then we sit and try to go back and go, what interventions can I afford? Is the return of fixing that intervention worth the cost? All of those things obviously in some of these things we won't know yet. Healthy pig nutrition, like I said, we spent millions of dollars doing this. I think we know how to feed healthy pigs, but we don't know how to feed them as when they get health challenged. Still some questions, but pretty well established. But you go back and you talk to people that have thrown away data in their research trials because their pigs got sick. They didn't feel it was relevant. Well, that was what you saw with when we were talking to Dean about this. Then Dean started going back, and then he was talking to other people in the industry, looking at, gosh, we saw some of the same things. And he started going back. I think this is going to be one of the things that will help us through some of these events that we had. And then actually there's some genetic selection stuff at risk. Al always used to say that there may be some advantage to how DeKalb did their selection because they let those pigs be grown through standard health systems when a lot of people were trying to get them healthy. And so then what we selected for over the years in a lot of cases were pigs that did really well when they're healthy, but struggled to deal with a disease challenge. Is it different? I think that's what we're looking to try to find out. Do they just eat less, or can we feed them differently? Are their needs different? Can we influence that ability to respond to an immunological challenge? Is it purely just that we need to feed the immune system, or is it the fact that they're burning up too much of something that they need to continue growth? We all see feed intake decreases and all sorts of things. And again, the beauty of me doing this presentation is I don't have to show you any data. Like I told Nick, I said, I don't like to have the data get in the way of a great observation. So there's many times I'm pretty sure what I see is right. I just need to find the data that agrees with it. But the situation that I think we're going to get into as we find some of this stuff out is what are our options when they do get sick? Can we fix it? Do we just step back? All these sorts of things. Or do we just feed them on the cheap? So I'd say thank you for your time. Like I said, Nick's got a lot of great data that he's going to show you that's with some of the first trials that we did. So
stay put here.
Okay.
Just take some questions here. Any questions you have? Let me begin with one. What do you do today, Fitz, when you have sick pigs? What do you do different?
I close the door.
Close the door.
Right now today we at Swine Graphics we have sick pig diets. So we will change this, which basically just are a swag at us saying they need to have so much soybean meal in. And so we will in areas that we know pigs get sick, like locations within the system, we will put those pigs on different diets through points that we believe they're most likely to get challenged. And obviously, PRRS is our big thing today. Flu is in that list. But we try to, right now we're taking a swag at what we think it is on the soybean meal, not knowing what part of the soybean meal it is, and we're just feeding them higher soybean meal diets.
How much higher?
We're limiting up. See, now I'm a damn veterinarian today. I thought it was amazing that I was in here speaking on the nutrition thing, but what we kind of thought looking at this whole thing, Steve, is that anything under about 150 pounds of soybean meal looked like it put us at risk.
Okay.
So Gene Gorley goes in and sets those diets at a minimum of 150 pounds of soybean meal, and then lets everything else go in and formulate around that.